All right. Hi there. There's just a couple of questions we have to ask you. Just in regards to the Magna Carta and the law, how many cases have you been involved with?
I've been involved with quite a few. The worst one of all, I think, it's not so much just my case, but it was one in Dorset, where we ended up taking over two uh, sort of common law fields, which were basically for the public land, so it was for the general public. And even though the county council for Dorset area itself, basically came out with fraudulent documentation, as the police came out with fraudulent documentation, even though I proved that they were in the wrong field, because each field, generic field, has its own Google type of number on it, you know what I mean? And the number that was on the warrant itself was for the next field up, and it had nothing to do with us, but the police still went ahead and basically demolished everything, you know what I mean, that we were trying to do for the public itself, because the public could actually grow food on there and whatever else they needed to bring their kids there. It was basically going to be a community just for the public itself, you know what I mean, and the land was going to be put to good use, because what the county councils have been doing is been hijacking all the county, all the public land. They either board it up, fence it off, they even put security guards on there and stuff like that. And what they do is, as long as for either 5-year period or a 7-year term period, if no public uses that land then deems that is somehow theirs now, and then they can go and sell it when they cannot, because they are public servants and they are merely trustees.
Wow. Yeah, it does sound like quite a bad case. So, the situation that you've been involved in, have you ever had police come up to you, or any solicitors come up to you where the situation was really bad?
Yeah, in my own case itself, I basically went to help a member of the public out, because where I became the county sheriff for the common law courts, where we uphold not just the common law but our constitution as well. By our constitution does come from our common law. Knowing all of this, and it's taken me a while to learn it, it then became my utmost law itself, you know what I mean, because these laws are from our forefathers. They have died to protect these laws and stuff like that. So the worst scenario with mine was, with all the police officers I've dealt with, some have listened, some have stomped away like a little child, and I'll be saying whoa, I haven't finished talking yet, where are you going, come back, you know, to basically carry on the discussion, because I wasn't being impolite or rude. And one police officer, which was, a police officer who, I think everybody knows who that police officer is, I do not want to give out that information, because if I give out that information, people will know who I am then.
Yeah.
But within that case of going to help this public member out, it was basically his child was being abducted by the social services, and Wiltshire County Council aiding and abetting were the police officers and the courts itself. Because I turned up on that day, there were 4 police cars outside the courtroom already waiting for me. I did not realise this until I parked my car up. And when the police officer came up to me and asked for my personal information, since I had committed no crime of any kind, I asked him, did I commit any offence? And he started stating about Road Traffic Act this and Road Traffic Act that, whichever, and I tried to explain to him, I said anything under legislation, which is a statute, that is an act, it needs the force of law. That force of law is common law. Thus, that also needs consent to it. That is what's giving the force of the law, is our common law. So people need to understand, when police officers come up, or anybody turns around and says it's been given the force of law, it is only given the force of law through the consent of each individual man or woman, because common law is the force of law.
Okay, so talking about the common law and legal advice, what are the misconceptions when the police stop you?
The misconception I mainly find myself, I think with other people as well, but myself, is their ignorance, of their arrogance of thinking that what they're doing, when I know for a fact they're all G4 security anyway, is a lot of them will persist on their presumption, and they'll presume that the legislation that is coming from Parliament is law, when I simply ask them the question is, okay, if you state is the law, so why is it called laws? Why isn't it called laws of Parliament? Why is it called acts of Parliament? So when you look at these two different words, what is an act? An act is an act. It's an act what you do on stage. You know, it does not define any other meaning to it. You know, there are certain words that are just that it's like common law.
No.
Common law is a defining word because it only represents the common folks.
Okay. So with like knowing all this, right? If you receive a letter, so you not speak to the person,
Right.
like what are the signs to look out for? Like, should you sign the letter? Should you give the letter away?
No, because your signature is the most important part of you. Your signature is worth, you know, as much as you want it to be. Whether you think your signature is only worth £1, or do you want it to think whether it's worth millions or billions. Your signature is your consent to anything. So putting your signature upon that piece of documentation, it is just a piece of documentation. It is only a 2D piece of paper. That 2D piece of paper is worth nothing until you put your signature upon it. As soon as you put your signature upon it, that piece of paper then becomes a live documentation. It is then a binding agreement upon whatever's on that piece of paper. So people don't seem to realise that what they are signing is what, as the saying goes, sign your life away.
Yeah. Good way. Okay, so what's the latest case that you've been involved with, and is there any tips or tricks to avoid getting in confrontational speeches with police?
The best way that I found is always to be polite. Manners has everything, and having manners and being polite at all times, it also takes you that little bit further, because when the police officer is still some police officers are still quite confrontal. The reason why some police officers are quite confrontal, because we did a lot of investigating in the past trying to figure out why police officers were that way towards members of the public. We then found out that a lot of police officers were actually popping pills, which are known to be like a new drug that basically is a bit like E, but a lot stronger than E. It's like got the triple kick to it. So it just doesn't hype you up, it gives you that aggression side to it as well.
Okay.
And the best way to deal with them is always stay polite, like, I mean, because when you stay polite and you keep your manners about you and you speak to them like a human being without swearing or getting nasty or cheeky or rude in any way, shape or form, you are then keeping respect not just for yourself but for the police officer. But it will carry a lot of weight in court as well, like, you know what I mean?
Okay. So we've only got like a couple of minutes left, but just in regards to the Magna Carta and common law, how does the Magna Carta relate to the common law, or what's the relationship between the two?
The relationship between the Magna Carta and the common law is, if you think back and you think to the community back then, which were like the middle or the dark stone ages, everybody lived in the straw huts or stick huts or stone huts or whatever it was. There was no motor vehicles about. There was no, you know, any type of weapon about, from the shield and spears, like, you know what I mean? People basically lived very simple lives then, like, you know what I mean? So in their simple lives were their customs. Those customs were the common law. Those customs built up over the years through each community and each group. When the Magna Carta was brought out, because the King John basically was a bandit basically, and he was like a big gangster, like back in the days, like, you know what I mean? And he would rob and tax the people and basically do exactly what's happening now, is use their guards with the shield and spears. You'd have like about 10, 15 of them going into each people's houses and taking whatever valuables they owned at the time, because the people could not pay their taxes or whatever, like, you know what I mean? Okay. And so the common law is basically taken and added with the 25 barons, who also got fed up because they were being attacked now as well. And so the people and the barons came together and brought that Magna Carta out, documentation, and forced King John to sign it.
Wow. Okay.
And that became our constitution then, like, you know what I mean? And 800 years later, it is still the law of the land. That is the only law of the land. It is not legislative, and it's got nothing to do with legal, because legislation and legal is corporate, commercial policies and regulations. As stated, if you look through their legislation, you will come across them two words. You will come across policy, and you will come across the word regulation. You look at the Magna Carta, you will only see law there. You will not see any rules or regulations or policies of any kind.
See?
It's got nothing to do with legal.
Okay, so how can the common law help me? Like, if I was an individual working a 9-to-5 job, how would that be able to help?
The working man himself at the moment has more authority than any company and even government and even the royals, because no matter what, man is sovereign. That is what sovereign means, because we brought the king down under our law, under the Magna Carta. So a working man, as it states in our common law, one who owns property is his rightful property. So if one's laboured for that property to then go and buy it, he has every right to that property. It's the same with taxes. Taxes is all consent. There is no law saying that anybody has to pay taxes. So if you've gone and worked for 12 hours a day, 5 days a week, you have laboured for that for every hour. For every hour that you labour for, you're entitled to that full payment to that. Nobody can touch anything out of that unless you give consent to it.
Okay, and the final question we have to ask is, like, you talk about the Magna Carta. Could you give a brief overview of the Magna Carta, like the important chapters to look out for if we come across this document?
For me, the most important chapters to me is Article 61, because that is a Lawful Rebellion. The Lawful Rebellion started in, I think it was the 23rd or the 24th of March 2001 by the barons. It has then exploded since then. There are Commonwealth countries who are also joining the rebellion as well now, under the Magna Carta, like, you know what I mean? So the parts for me that I look out for is Article 13, which basically puts government exactly in this place and where it is. And it also states very clearly in Article 13 of the Magna Carta that we have our own laws, our own customs and our own way, our beliefs and the way we live. So within the 1 mile area, they are bound by their own customs and their own beliefs. And they have stated that very clearly in Article 13. The next article is Article 39. Article 39 is due process of law. This is our customs and our beliefs. That is in the Magna Carta. That is very clear. It's also in number 40 as well. And number 40 is basically nobody can deny you justice. It's as simple as that.
Wow. Well, thank you very much for that useful information. I'm sure we'll be hearing soon.